Elise was operating under deep cover, her true rank and mission buried beneath anonymity. To Michael, she was invisible, just another inexperienced recruit, easy to belittle, easy to dismiss. When a delegation of Japanese military officers arrived in the United States, Michael saw his chance to assert dominance. He switched to Japanese, confident no one around him could understand. With a smug smile, he mocked Elise to the Japanese captain, calling her ugly, foul-smelling, unworthy of the uniform she wore. Each insult was delivered casually, as if consequence did not exist. The Japanese captain's expression tightened, discomfort flashing in his eyes. He was about to respond when a calm, steady voice cut through the moment. Elise spoke in flawless Japanese, polite, precise, professional. She introduced herself with respect, correcting nothing, accusing no one. Michael turned pale, his breath caught. He hadn't just been hurt, he had been exposed. Michael showed no remorse, no apology, only disbelief and wounded pride. And in that silence, something irreversible began. Elise and the Japanese captain exchanged a brief glance. One warriors recognize instantly the moment when restraint becomes intent. What followed was not revenge driven by emotion, but a calculated lesson designed to end this behavior forever. A lesson Michael would never forget, a reckoning that will unfold quietly, methodically, and in full view of those who mattered most. But before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story really began. The mid-morning sun pressed down on the tarmac of Coronado Naval Amphibious Base with an unforgiving weight, heat radiating upward, invisible waves that shimmered against the concrete. The sharp smell of jet fuel hung in the air, mingling with salt carried in from the Pacific. Boots were aligned with near-surgical precision, heels biting into the ground, as the unit stood at parade rest. Lieutenant Commander Michael Thorne occupied the space in front of them like it belonged to him, a divine right. His posture was exaggerated, chest expanded, shoulders locked back, every line of his pristine uniform pressed to regulation perfection. Not a single grain of dust clung to the fabric, a deliberate contrast to the operational fatigues worn by the personnel behind him. He lifted his wrist just enough to glance at his watch, a heavy, military-grade timepiece, and his lips curled faintly as if the delay itself were a personal insult. His gaze drifted down the line and stopped at the far end. Elise, she stood motionless, spine straight, chin level. Her fatigues bore the marks of work rather than ceremonial smears along one sleeve, faint abrasions at the knees. There was no trident on her chest, no visible rank stitched into her uniform, only a nondescript logistics support patch affixed with Velcro. Her hair was pulled back tight into a severe bun, not a strand out of place, not for vanity but for function. A faint smudge of grease marked her cheekbone, left untouched. She hadn't bothered to wipe it away. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In his mind, she didn't belong in the frame at all. She was excess, dead weight, a concession to optics rather than capability. He dismissed her with the same ease he dismissed clutter left on a briefing table. The low growl of an engine cut through the stillness. A black SUV rolled onto the tarmac, escorted by two military police vehicles. Tires crunched to a stop. Doors opened in practice sequence. Captain Kenji Tanaka of the Japanese Special Forces Group stepped out, followed by two aides who moved with quiet economy, eyes already cataloging the environment. Tanaka's uniform was immaculate, his posture relaxed but cold, like a blade at rest. Michael stepped forward, boots striking the pavement sharply. His salute snapped into place, crisp and rehearsed. The smile he offered was polished, confident, bordering on predatory. He shook Tanaka's hand firmly, holding eye contact just long enough to establish dominance. They exchanged a few pleasantries in English, the kind spoken for form rather than meaning. Then Michael shifted. Without warning, he switched to Japanese, his tone casual, almost conversational. His eyes slid sideways, landing briefly on Elise as if she were an object misplaced in his peripheral vision. "Welcome to our facility, Captain," he said smoothly. "Please ignore the trash we have to keep around. That woman at the end. She is ugly, smells like wet dog, and brings shame to the uniform. She is only here to carry boxes." A muscle jumped once beneath his eye as he finished speaking, the faintest tell of satisfaction. Captain Tanaka's smile didn't vanish, it froze. The corners of his mouth stiffened, eyes narrowing a fraction as they moved from Michael to Elise and back again. The air between them thickened, as if the base itself had taken a held breath. The insult was not just personal. It was cultural, ethical, a breach of an unspoken warrior code that transcended language and borders. Tanaka inhaled, preparing to speak. Before he could, a calm voice rose from the end of the formation. "The commander is mistaken, Captain Tanaka." Heads turned. The sound cut cleanly through the heat engine nose, steady and controlled. Elise spoke in flawless Japanese, precise, formal, the elevated register of someone trained not merely to communicate, but to command respect. Each syllable landed with deliberate weight. "I apologize for the commander's lack of discipline," she continued evenly. "My appearance is due to repairing the transport designated for your team, which his squad neglected to maintain." Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Michael's head snapped around. The color drained from his face in a single rush, leaving his skin ashen beneath the brim of his cover. His mouth opened, then closed, his jaw working soundlessly as if language itself had abandoned him. For half a second, his eyes flickered not with anger, but disbelief. Elise stood perfectly still at attention, gaze fixed forward, expression unreadable. She did not look at him. She didn't need to. She hadn't just spoken Japanese, she had owned it. Michael blinked hard. Blood surged back into his face, heat crawling up his neck as humiliation replaced shock, his lips pressed into a thin line. He did not apologize, he did not correct himself. His eyes darkened instead, narrowing with something colder than rage, a promise. In front of a foreign captain, in front of his own men, he had been stripped bare and done by someone he had already dismissed as nothing. And he would not forget it. Michael Thorne did not acknowledge Elise again for the remainder of the tour. He walked half a step ahead of the delegation, shoulders rigid, jaw locked, answering questions from Captain Tanaka with clipped efficiency. Each time the Japanese officer spoke, Michael responded with practiced professionalism, but the muscle at his temple twitched in a steady, involuntary rhythm, a silent metronome counting down something private and volatile. Elise remained where she was told to be, 2 paces behind, eyes forward, hands still. She registered everything without reacting. The subtle tightening of Michael's fingers, and Tanaka redirected a question, the way Michael avoided her reflection in the polished metal of the corridor walls. The faint, controlled exhale through his nose each time she entered his peripheral vision. They moved toward the mess hall, boots echoing against steel decking as the group funneled through a narrower passageway. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and overheated machinery. At the bulkhead doors, the formation naturally compressed. That was when Michael slowed just enough to let the others pass. Elise felt him before she saw him. He pivoted sharply and stepped into her space, close enough that the crease in his uniform brushed her sleeve. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He leaned in, posture angled to block the line of sight from anyone behind them, and spoke from the corner of his mouth. "You think you're clever, logistics," he whispered. The words were controlled, almost surgical. His breath carried the sharp note of peppermint cum layer over stale coffee. A vein along his neck stood out as he spoke, pulsing once, twice. "You embarrassed me," he continued, the consonants compressed tight between his teeth. "That's insubordination." Elise did not lean back. She did not shift her feet. Her breathing remained slow, measured, barely visible beneath the fabric of her blouse. "I corrected a translation error, sir," she replied. Her tone was flat, stripped of inflection. Her eyes remained fixed on a point just past his ear, as if he were a briefing slide rather than a man. It was a deliberate choice. Engagement invited escalation. Detachment denied him oxygen. Michael's lips curled, not into a smile, but something thinner. His eyes flicked briefly to her collar, searching for rank that wasn't there. "You're on my base," he said, "my rules." His voice dropped another degree, almost intimate. "Prepare for the welcome committee tomorrow at 0400. Since you speak Japanese, maybe you can translate pain for me." The final word lingered, soft and deliberate. He straightened abruptly, mask snapping back into place, and turned away without waiting for a response. His boots struck the deck hard as he closed the distance to Captain Tanaka, resuming his role as host as if nothing had occurred. Elise watched him go. Her pulse remained even, no spike, no tremor. She reached down and adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, a small, habitual motion. As the fabric shifted, A faint, jagged scar became visible along the inside of her wrist, pale against her skin, and even at the edges, old, surgical, the kind left by zip restraints cut away in a hurry under fire. Okinawa, 3 years ago. Classified extraction. She covered it again without a second glance. That evening, the officers' quarters were quiet, the air humming faintly with recycled ventilation. Elise sat at the small desk in her assigned room, boots off, sleeves rolled with regulation precision. She was reviewing maintenance logs when a soft sound interrupted the stillness. Paper against tile. She looked down as a thin envelope slid beneath the door, stopping just short of her boot. No knock, no footsteps retreating. She picked it up, examining the texture before opening it. High-grade rice paper, imported, intentional. The message was written in careful ink strokes. To Wolf who bares his teeth too early loses the hunt. Meet me at the East Hangar. Midnight. Tanaka. Elise read it once, then again. Her face did not change. She crossed to the sink, turned on the tap, and held the paper over the basin. A lighter flicked open in her hand. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges inward. She watched as the characters blackened, warped, and dissolved into ash, washing the remains down the drain with cold water. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the water run. Michael Thorne was not just arrogant, he was reckless, emotionally compromised, a liability. And in this line of work, liabilities didn't just fail inspections, they got people killed. The East Hangar slept in half-light, its cavernous interior washed in the dull red glow of aviation safety lamps. The parked Osprey loomed like a grounded predator, its nutshell tilted, rotors locked, casting long, segmented shadows across the concrete. The air smelled of hydraulic fluid and cold metal, layered with the faint bite of tobacco. Captain Kenji Tanaka stood beside the landing gear, one boot resting lightly against the tire, posture loose but balanced. A cigarette burned between his fingers, the ember pulsing each time he drew in smoke. He didn't turn when Elisa's footsteps crossed the threshold. He didn't need to. He extended the pack toward her, arm angled just enough to acknowledge her presence without ceremony. She stopped at a respectful distance. Her eyes tracked exits, catwalks, the darkened corners above the hangar doors. She declined the cigarette with a subtle shake of her head. I knew a woman who spoke with that specific dialect, Tanaka said quietly, smoke drifting from his mouth in a thin ribbon. She was part of a ghost unit, operated out of Yokosuka. Elisa's face remained neutral, only a slight tightening at the corners of her eyes betrayed calculation. She shifted her weight, boots aligning with a faint seam in the concrete. I was a linguist attached to DevGroup before the restructuring, she said. The lie came out smooth, properly paced, supported by just enough truth to sound credible. Her voice never rose to defend itself. Tanaka's lips curved almost imperceptibly. He tapped ash onto the floor, grinding it out with measured pressure. He knew. She knew he knew. The acknowledgement hung between them, unspoken and unnecessary. Commander Michael is a small man with a big rank, Tanaka continued. His gaze stayed forward, fixed on nothing in particular. He plans to use the joint readiness exercise on Friday to humiliate you further. He has assigned you as the high-value target. The hostage, Elise inhaled slowly through her nose. A fraction of a second passed before she responded. Let me guess, she said. A dry smile touched her lips and vanished just as quickly. He's the rescuer, Tanaka exhaled, the smoke briefly obscuring his face. He intends to leave you in the torture simulation phase for 3 hours before breaching, to test your resolve. At that, he turned, fully. His eyes were sharp, assessing, the gaze of a man who had watched people break and cataloged the signs. A muscle along his jaw tightened. It is dishonorable, he said, and unsafe. I wish to assist in teaching him a lesson. Elise met his eyes without flinching. Her hands relaxed at her sides, fingers loose, but one thumb brushed briefly against the seam of her trousers, a grounding habit. When she spoke, her voice was lower. If we do this, Captain, we don't just embarrass him, she said. We end his career. She paused, letting the implication settle. He's dangerous to his own team. Tanaka studied her for a long moment. The red light caught the planes of his face, carving lines that spoke of years spent in marginal places under questionable orders. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small access card. turning it between his fingers. "I have the access codes to the simulation controls," he said. His eyes gleamed faintly in the crimson light. "We can change the parameters." He stepped closer, lowering his voice not in secrecy, but precision. The hunter becomes the prey. Elise looked past him to the Osprey, to the silent machinery waiting for orders. Her breathing remained steady, but something cold and deliberate settled behind her eyes. She nodded once, a single, irreversible decision. Friday morning arrived wrapped in a dense marine layer, the fog rolling in from the Pacific can clinging to the base like a damp shroud. Visibility dropped to a few dozen meters, muting sound and flattening depth, the kind of weather instructors quietly appreciated for stress inoculation. The kill house rose out of the haze in heart, angular lines and artificial maze of reinforced plywood walls, rubberized flooring, and elevated catwalks designed to punish hesitation and expose poor judgment. Condensation beaded along its surfaces, turning handholds slick and unforgiving. Above it all, the observation deck sat like a tribunal. Behind thick, soundproof glass, base leadership stood shoulder to shoulder, rank insignia caught the low light. A visiting rear admiral occupied the center position, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the structure below. No one spoke. The hum of electronics and the faint whir of cameras filled the space. On the ground level, Michael Thorne faced his Alpha team. His stance was aggressive, feet planted wide, shoulders squared. He spoke with clipped authority, a laser pointer tapping against a laminated schematic mounted on a portable board. "Standard hostage rescue," he said. "Hostiles are simulated. Rules of engagement apply. No shortcuts." His eyes slid toward Elise, lingering just long enough. "Hostage is secure in room 4. He lifted his hand and pointed directly at her. "You go in now. Don't get comfortable. We're going to take our time clearing the perimeter." A faint twitch pulled at the corner of his eye. Satisfaction, contained but present, he envisioned it clearly, hours alone in a cold, lightless room. Plastic restraints biting into her wrists, muscles stiffening. Uncertainty gnawing, waiting for him. Elise met his gaze without reaction. She gave a single nod, precise, professional, and stepped forward when the op for actors approached. They played their roles well, firm but controlled as they guided her toward the kill house entrance. Her boots crossed the threshold, the outside nose faded. The door shut behind her with a heavy metallic thud that reverberated through the corridor. Inside room 4, the temperature dropped several degrees. The air smelled faintly of dust and old sweat. The door locked with an audible click. Elise stood still for a count of 3, then her wrists flexed. The plastic zip tie snapped cleanly, to sound sharp in the confined space. She rolled her shoulders once, circulation returning without urgency. Kneeling, she slid her fingers beneath a loose section of flooring she had prepared earlier that morning. Movements economical, practiced. The board lifted just enough. The bag came free smoothly. She opened it and checked the contents by touch alone. Night vision goggles, modified simunition pistol. Everything where it should be. Above her, in the control booth, Captain Tanaka stood beside the simulation technician. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes missed nothing. At his subtle nod, the technician reached for a USB drive and inserted it into the console. Monitors flickered briefly, data refreshed. The scenario label changed, standard rescue disappeared. SEER level 4. Evasion and hunt replaced it. Tanaka's lips pressed into a thin line, no smile, just intent. Back inside the room, Elise secured the goggles, her breathing slow and controlled. She chambered the pistol, testing the weight, the balance. The sounds of movement echoed faintly somewhere beyond the walls. Michael's team, beginning their methodical approach. She rose to her feet and melted into the shadows. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was the terrain. Michael raised his fist, the signal sharp and absolute, and brought it down with controlled force. "Alpha team, move to breach," he said into his comms. His voice carried the calm authority of command, but a faint tightness crept into the final consonants. He slowed the tempo deliberately, savoring it. This was where she would start to feel it, time stretching, uncertainty setting in. "Slow clear," he added, "check every corner." The breacher set the charge. A muted thump followed, and the door gave way. The team flowed inside in textbook formation, rifles up, muzzles steady, boots rolling heel to toe over rubberized flooring. The kill house swallowed them whole. Normally, a low ambient glow-guided movement, enough to outline walls and doorways. This time, the light vanished all at once, not dimmed, not reduced, gone. Absolute darkness wrapped around them, thick and total, erasing depth and distance. The sudden absence of visual reference forced a collective pause. Less than a second, but enough. Tech issue. One of the operators murmured, the question slipping out before discipline could clamp down on it. Michael's jaw tightened. His fingers flexed once around the grip of his rifle. Cut the chatter, he snapped. Go to NVGs. He flipped his night vision down in one practiced motion. The world bloomed into green phosphor, grainy but navigable. Walls reappeared, doorways resolved. His breathing steadied as familiarity returned. The team advanced. They approached the first hallway, angles tight, spacing clean. The point man stepped forward, rifle sweeping. His chest rig exploded in red light. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was sharp, insistent, cutting through the comms net. Man down, sniper. The point man shouted automatically, dropping to a seated position against the wall, weapon lowered in compliance with the simulation rules. Michael spun toward the direction the shot should have come from. His NVGs painted nothing but empty space and flat surfaces, no elevated angle, no exposed lane, no viable firing position. Where did that come from? He demanded. No one answered. No one could. The geometry didn't work. Before he could issue another command, sound bled into the space, low at first, then unmistakable. It wasn't white noise or simulated gunfire. It was a voice. His voice. Ugly. The word stretched, warped slightly, as if dragged through static. Smells like wet dog. The phrase repeated, looping unevenly, echoing through the corridors from unseen speakers. The timing was off just enough to feel wrong. Familiar, but corrupted. Michael's mouth went dry. His eyes darted, scanning for the source, for the technician booth, for anything that explained this deviation. His pulse crept into his throat, each beat loud inside his helmet. What the hell is this? He hissed into the comms. No reply. The team shifted uneasily. One operator's shoulders rose a fraction higher than before. Another adjusted his grip twice in quick succession. The green glow of NVGs caught the subtle fogging of breath inside masks. Michael took a step forward, then another. The floor seemed to slope where it hadn't before. Shadows clung to corners longer than they should have. Every sound, the scuff of a boot, the brush of fabric felt amplify, accusatory. This wasn't running like a drill. This was personal. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen and unhurried, Elise moved. Michael wasn't clearing a building anymore. He was walking into something that knew him. Above the kill house, behind layered ballistic glass and acoustic insulation, the observation deck remained hushed. Screens glowed in tight grids, each feed tracking angles, heat signatures, biometric overlays. The rear admiral leaned forward slowly, hands braced on the rail. A faint crease formed between his brows as his eyes followed the erratic movement of Alpha Team. I didn't authorize a SIP element for this drill, he said at last. His voice was even, but the question carried weight. Who is running the OPFR? A few heads turned. No one answered immediately. Captain Tanaka stepped forward from the edge of the deck. He inclined his head in a restrained bow, the motion economical, respectful without submission. His hands remained clasped behind his back. I suggested a stress test for the commander, Admiral, Tanaka said. His English was precise, each word placed deliberately. To simulate asymmetric warfare, cognitive overload, moral pressure. Is he not elite? The Admiral studied him. One thumb rubbed slowly against the other, a habitual motion when weighing risk. On the monitors, Michael Thorne paused to lawn at a corner, rifle wavering a few degrees off center line. After a moment, the Admiral leaned back, let it run. Inside the structure, Alpha Team was unraveling. A sharp metallic click echoed down a narrow passageway. One of Michael's remaining operators froze, eyes flicking down just in time to see the filament stretch ankle high. Too late. The paint mine detonated with a flat, concussive pop. Red dye splattered across his thigh and vest. His chest rig lit up immediately. Beep, 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 hit, the operator said. Breath tight. He lowered himself to the floor, back against the wall. Weapon grounded. Another step, another mistake. The second strat was higher chest level, nearly invisible under NVGs unless you knew where to look. The mine burst against the operator's shoulder, coating his arm in red. He exhaled sharply, jaw clenched, then followed protocol and went down. Michael was left with two men. His breathing had changed. Shorter pulls, faster releases, sweat gathered along his hairline, trickling beneath the band of his helmet. He swallowed once, throat working around dryness. "Move," he ordered, voice clipped. "Room 4. Now." They advanced, tighter this time, barrels leading, fingers indexed. The corridor narrowed before opening into the hostage room entrance. Michael stepped forward and kicked the door hard, the impact reverberating through the frame. He stormed inside, weapon up, ready to unload every word he had been holding. The room was empty. The chair sat centered beneath a harsh overhead light, no restraints, no Elise. Instead, a crude mannequin occupied the seat, its proportions raw, its surface unfinished. Perched on its head, tilted slightly, almost mockingly, was Michael's dress hat. Pinned to the mannequin's chest was a sheet of paper, scrawled in thick marker. "Look behind you." Michael's pupils constricted. He spun. His last two men were already down. They lay sprawled near the doorway, vests pulsing red in asynchronous rhythm. One had landed on his side, knees drawn slightly as if bracing for impact that had already come. The other stared up at the ceiling, unmoving. In the doorway stood a silhouette, still, upright, balanced, not cowering, not rushing. Perfect Weaver stance. The figure fire. Thwip, thwip. Michael gasped as pain bloomed across his torso. The simunition round struck hard, compressed force driving air from his lungs. He staggered back a half step, instinctively checking his vest. No lights. Another impact landed low, sharp enough to force a grunt from his throat. His fingers trembled as they tightened around his rifle. "What?" His voice broke. He coughed, trying to draw breath through the sting. The system had been altered. He could feel it now. Pain registered, consequences remained. He was alive. And hunted. Command. Equipment malfunction. Michael shouted into his radio, his voice spiking past control. "Target is using unauthorized weapons." He waited for the reassuring crackle of a response. An acknowledgement, a correction, anything. Nothing came back. The channel was dead, no static, no crosstalk, no background noise, just silence pressing in around him. His thumb jabbed the transmit button again, harder this time, as if force might punch through the void. "Command, respond." He barked. Silence. Michael realized, then truly realized, that he was alone. He backed into the hallway, boots scuffing against the rubberized floor. His breathing had lost its cadence, each inhale shallow, each exhale sharp and uneven. Sweat ran freely now, soaking the collar of his uniform, collecting under the straps of his vest. Inside his mask, moisture fogged the lenses of his NVGs, smearing the green glow into useless haze. He blinked rapidly, head jerking as he tried to clear his vision. The kill house felt different, narrower, taller. The walls seemed to lean inward, the angles unfamiliar despite the dozens of runs he had logged through similar structures. His shoulders brushed plywood, where he didn't remember it being so close. Clan. The sound came from his left, metal striking concrete. It wasn't loud, but it was precise, intentional. Michael spun and fired instinctively. Simunition rounds thudded into the wall, chewing shallow marks into plywood. The recoil jarred his already frayed nerves. "Show yourself," he yelled. His voice cracked on the second word. "You're court-martialed. You hear me? You're done." The words echoed back at him, thinner, weaker each time they rebounded off the walls. His fingers stayed tight on the trigger longer than doctrine allowed before he forced it to relax. His hands were shaking now, not violently but enough. Above him, unseen, Elise moved. She shifted along the overhead supports with controlled precision, weight distributed evenly, every contact point tested before commitment. Her breathing remained slow, nasal, barely perceptible. She tracked Michael's movement not by sight alone, but by sound: the scrape of his boots, the hitch in his breath, the cadence of panic accelerating beneath his bluster. She wasn't stalking him, she was guiding him. She adjusted position, calculated distance, then released the flashbang simulator. It bounced once, twice, and detonated. Bang! The concussive report slammed into Michael like a physical blow. Light and sound tore through his senses simultaneously. He screamed an involuntary, High-pitched sound ripped from his throat as he stumbled backward. His heel caught awkwardly. He went down hard, air driven from his lungs in a sharp grunt. His rifle skidded across the floor, clattering out of reach. Michael scrabbled blindly, palm slapping the ground, fingers grasping at nothing. His movements were frantic, uncoordinated. His knee struck the floor again as he tried to rise, only to collapse back onto his side. He sucked in air, chest heaving, eyes wide behind fogged lenses. The speakers overhead crackled, not distorted this time, not recorded. A woman's voice filled the corridor, calm, controlled, unmistakably present. "True command is earned, Michael," Elise said, in Japanese, not worn. The words were clear, immaculate. They didn't echo as much as they settled, heavy and deliberate. Michael froze. His chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. His hands curled into fists against the floor, knuckles whitening. With a guttural sound of frustration and fear, he tore the mask from his face and flung it aside. Cool air hit his sweat-soaked skin, but it didn't steady him. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils blown wide. "Speak English," he shouted hoarsely. "Fight me like a man." His voice rang hollow in the darkness. Somewhere above, unseen and unhurried, Elise adjusted her stance. The observation deck remained hushed, the kind of silence that pressed against the eardrums. No one shifted in their seat, no one cleared their throat. The glow from the monitors washed the rear admiral's face in pale blues and greens, accentuating the deep line carved between his brows. His hands were folded behind his back, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles had gone white. The thermal feeds did not lie, they render everything in brutal honesty. On one screen, Michael staggered through the maze, his heat signature flaring erratically. His movements were no longer efficient, no slicing of corners, no deliberate pieing of angles. He was over-rotating, muzzle wavering, shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow from the dark itself. His mouth moved constantly, words spilling out in sharp, jagged bursts. Even without audio enhancement, the cadence was unmistakable. Rage, fear, slurs hurled into empty corridors, each one met with nothing but his own echo. The admiral's jaw tightened. A small muscle jumped near his temple, the only outward sign of reaction. Another monitor tracked Elise. Her thermal outline was a study in control, heart rate steady, heat plume consistent. She flowed through the structure with disciplined economy, heels barely lifting, center of gravity low, rifle tucked tight to her shoulder. When she paused, she became part of the background, her signature blending with the metal framework and overhead piping. She did not rush, she did not chase, she waited, letting Michael's panic do the work for her. She intercepted a reinforcement actor near a junction, one step inside his reactionary gap. A hand clamped over the mouth, the other rolling the wrist. Torque applied at the elbow. The takedown was silent, surgical. The actor was down before his body registered pain. Red indicator light blinking to life as Elise was already gone, disappearing upward into shadow. "That movement," the rear admiral murmured. His finger rose, hovering inches from the screen, tracking the ghost of her path. "I haven't seen that technique since the DevGru Joint Ops in 18. Tanaka inclined his head, the gesture precise. She adapted it, removed unnecessary motion. The admiral's eyes flicked to him, sharp. "She's not logistics." "No," Tanaka said evenly. "She is Ronin." The word settled heavily in the room. The admiral's breath paused for half a beat. "Ronin. Classify. Deep cover integrity assets. Operators embedded not to train, but to expose. To provoke failure under controlled conditions." Elise was not here to be evaluated. She was the instrument. And the man unraveling on the screens had no idea. Michael's feet filled another monitor as he stumbled backward, boots skidding on concrete doused. He slammed into a bulkhead marked boiler room, the stenciled letters glowing faintly under infrared. Dead end. His shoulders sagged, chest heaving beneath his vest. Sweat pooled along his collar line, fogging the inside of his mask again as he dragged air through clenched teeth. He wiped at his face with a shaking hand, leaving a streak across the visor. His other hand tightened around his pistol grit, tendons standing out, finger dancing too close to the trigger. He glanced left, right, up. The tick in his eye was visible even through the grainy feet. Above him, unseen, Elise watched. She was still, balanced on a steel beam, weight distributed perfectly, breathing slow and silent. Her eyes never left him. This was no longer a drill. It was an audit in motion, and every second he spent cornered. Every unprofessional outburst, every wasted round was another line item written into the record. On the observation deck, the Admiral exhaled through his nose, long and controlled. "He's done," he said quietly. Tanaka did not answer. He did not need to. On the screen, Michael raised his weapon toward the darkness, back pressed to cold steel. Trapped by a ghost he could neither see nor outrun. Elise shifted her grip, preparing to end it, her expression unreadable even to the cameras. The sidearm came up into Michael's trembling grip, his finger slipping along the frame as if unsure where it belonged. His chest rose and fell in short, ragged bursts, sweat dripping from his jawline and darkening the color of his fatigues. Then, without warning, the kill house lights detonated to full intensity. White light flooded the space, harsh and unforgiving. Michael recoiled, throwing an arm up instinctively, pupils constricting as his vision burned. Shapes snapped into focus, distance collapsed. Elise stood 10 feet in front of him. She was no longer a shadow. Her rifle was slung and secured, sidearm holstered. With deliberate calm, she reached up and removed her eye protection, setting it on the deck beside her boot. Her face was composed, breathing slow, pulse barely visible at her throat. She looked at him the way a surgeon looked at an incision, precise, detached, already finished in her mind. "Index," she said. Voice low, almost gentle, the word struck him like an insult. "No." Michael roared, the sound cracking as it tore out of his chest. Adrenaline surge, drowning whatever discipline he had left. His hand fumbled, then shoved his pistol back into its holster. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped along his cheek. "I'm going to break you." He lunged. The punch was wide, sloppy, driven by fury rather than mechanics. Every instructor rule was violated in that instant loss of control. Closed fist strike in a live training environment, assault on a non-engaging operator. Up in the observation deck, the Rear Admiral was already on his feet, chair scraping sharply against the floor as his hand shot toward the microphone. He never reached it. Elise moved. She didn't retreat. She stepped forward, inside Michael's arc, her foot sliding just enough to steal his base. Her left forearm rose to parry, redirecting his arm past her shoulder as if brushing aside an inconvenience. Her right hand caught his sleeve, fingers locking at the triceps, hips turned. Gravity did the rest. The throw was fluid and merciless. Michael's feet left the ground, his momentum betraying him completely. He hit the rubberized floor hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs in a wet, broken grunt. Before his spine finished absorbing the shock, Elise was already with him, knees pinning his shoulder line, one arm threading under his chin. Her forearm slid into position with practiced precision. The crook of her elbow sealed against his carotid artery. Her other hand clasped her own bicep, the lock cinching tight. No wasted pressure, no panic, a textbook vascular restraint. Michael bucked, boots hammering against the floor in frantic, uneven kicks. His fingers clawed at her sleeve, nails scraping uselessly against fabric. Veins stood out along his neck, face flushing from red to a sickly purple as blood flow diminished. His breathing turned into harsh, animal gasps, then sputter. Elise watched his eyes. When they began to glaze, when the resistance faltered and his limbs lost coordination, she released the hold with exact timing, rolling away and rising to her feet in one smooth motion. Michael collapsed onto his side, coughing violently, dragging air into his lungs as if it were the first breath he had ever taken. He retched, palm slapping weakly against the floor, humiliation radiating off him in waves stronger than the heat from his body. Elise stood over him, posture straight, hands relaxed at her sides. Not a flicker of triumph crossed her face, only completion. The kill house door opened with a heavy metallic groan. The Rear Admiral entered first, boots striking the deck with measured force, his expression carved from stone. Captain Tanaka followed half a step behind, eyes flicking briefly to Michael's crumpled form before settling on Elise. No surprise, no concern, just confirmation. Michael looked up from the floor, chest still hitching, and saw them. The fight drained out of him completely. His shoulders sagged, gaze dropping back to the mat as the weight of what he had done finally settled in. Elise remained at attention, vindicated without a word. Michael staggered upright, boots scraping against the rubberized floor as if it were suddenly on familiar terrain. His uniform was smeared with sweat and dust, collar twisted, rank patch barely clinging to the Velcro. He forced his spine straight and snapped a salute that wavered halfway up, fingers trembling before they reached his brow. His pupils darted, searching for control that no longer answered him. "Admiral," his voice cracked on the word. Saliva gathered at the corner of his mouth as he swallowed hard. This woman assaulted a superior officer. "I want her arrested, immediately." His arm shot out, finger stabbing the air toward Elise, shaking so badly it betrayed him more than any words could. The rear admiral did not acknowledge him. His gaze was fixed on Elise, assessing, weighing, unmoved by the chaos still echoing in the room. A long beat passed, Michael's salute faltered, his arm lowering an inch at a time as the silence pressed down on him. "Report, Commander," the admiral said calmly. The word landed like a blunt instrument. Michael's breath caught. His mouth opened, then closed again. "Commander." Elise stepped forward and squared her shoulders. She adjusted the crease of her sleeve with a precise tug, smoothing the fabric as if preparing for inspection rather than standing in the aftermath of controlled violence. Her chin lifted a fraction. Her eyes never left the admiral. "Lieutenant Commander Elise Vance," she said, voice steady, resonant. "Office of Special Warfare Inspection, sir." She reached into her cargo pocket and withdrew a folded Velcro patch. For a moment, it rested in her palm, gold thread catching the overhead lights. Then she slapped it onto her shoulder, the Navy SEAL trident, gold, clean, final, beneath it, the unmistakable insignia of an 04, equal rank to Michael. Untouchable clearance beyond him. A subtle sound escaped Michael's throat, something between disbelief and panic. His jaw worked, but no words came. A tick jumped beneath his right eye, rapid and uncontrollable. "My audit is complete," Elise continued. Her voice carried effortlessly through the kill house, cutting through the lingering echoes of alarms and boots. "Commander Thorne demonstrates a pattern of emotional instability, compromised tactical judgment, and prejudicial conduct incompatible with operational leadership. His behavior presents a clear risk to force protection and unit cohesion." She paused, letting the assessment stand on its own weight. "He's unfit for command." Michael turned to the admiral, eyes wide now, glassy with desperation. His lips parted as if to plead, but nothing formed. The man who had barked orders minutes earlier now looked small, shoulders slumped, chest caving inward with each shallow breath. The admiral stepped forward, his hand rose and, without ceremony, ripped the command patch from Michael's sleeve. The Velcro tore loudly in the quiet room, the sound sharp and irreversible. He dropped the patch onto the floor. It landed near Michael's boot, face up. "Your relief, Thorne," the admiral said. His tone was flat, administrative. "Get off my deck." Military police appeared at the doorway, their movements crisp and efficient. One took Michael by the arm. Another positioned himself at his back. Michael didn't resist. He couldn't. His legs seen, unsure of their purpose, he was guided toward the exit. As they pulled him away, he twisted his head back one last time. Captain Tanaka stood near the threshold, posture immaculate. He inclined his head toward Elise in a respectful bow, one warrior acknowledging another. Michael's mouth fell open as the door swallowed him and slammed shut. Elise returned the bow, controlled and exact. "The trash has been taken out," she said quietly, in Japanese. Tanaka's lips curved into a restrained smile. "A clean base is a strong base." Elise turned back toward the admiral, the nose of the kill house fading behind her. Her breathing remained even, her hands were steady. The mission silent, surgical, absolute was complete. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with us.